until we get some movement here. There's somebody. All right. Thanks for getting up on a snowy day. We're going to do something that we've done before. Hello, Karen.
Good morning.
Good morning. All right. I've got a friend. We'll be vague about her location since we're in a time that we're in nowadays. But she's just say she's somewhere north of the border. So tell us what's going on north of the border.
Okay. So where I am, schools have been out on and off since March 2020. There's been times when kids have been allowed to be in school in person and times where they haven't been in person. We've kept our kids out since March 2020 because they've gone back and forth so many times. Now they're saying that they can go back January 17th. I think that they're likely going to change that again, but they're also saying that they have to do testing before they can go back to school. They're not going to report anybody who's vaccinated as being positive, but unvaccinated they are. The testing that we do, the swab testing, has ethylene glycol in it, and also has what's the other thing? Sorry.
That's all right.
Graphene oxide. And both of those things are actually really bad health-wise. You can have a lot of effects from it, from blood clots to cancer. Even though some of the health authorities have been questioned about it, I worked in a long-term care home and questioned about that. And even though you can look it up in the ingredients from the manufacturer, it was denied to us that it was actually in it and that it was an issue. So the other thing that's going on here is we have approximately 72,000 healthcare workers that are out of work right now because they've refused the vaccine. So our hospitals are falling apart at this point. A lot of hospitals are closing their emergency rooms. A lot of hospitals you can't give birth at certain hospitals, so you may have to travel. If you live in a smaller town, you may have to travel 45 minutes if you're in labor. And they may turn you away if the emergency isn't something they deem to be life or death. They also are refusing unvaccinated people to come into some hospitals, and your doctors now are trying to push through here that you can't renew prescriptions if you're unvaccinated, so it doesn't matter what your prescription is. We also have a situation now where since November 2021, it's only been people who have been vaccinated that can work in hospitals, long-term care homes, doctors' offices, anything having to do with the health field. So residents in long-term healthcare homes are not allowed to leave. They are allowed to go see their family. A lot of them have been stuck in their rooms. isolating. They can't even leave their room to socialize with other residents. Their families can't come in to visit for a long time. No one could come in to visit. They changed it so that only the vaccinated could come in to visit, and only if somebody was on palliative care. So now most of the nursing homes here are in outbreak. A lot of the workers there are off sick right now or are isolating, even though it isn't in the news, because they don't want people to see that it's only the people who are vaccinated that are causing this issue. I still talk to people that I worked with on a regular basis, and they're down about 18 staff members right now who have to self-isolate. So when I was still working, which was in 2020, it wasn't uncommon to work 13 to 15 days in a row with no time off because they were always short-staffed. So now they're facing staff shortages. They're also, a lot of them are burnt out. They also now have to, and there was a woman that I worked with who, after receiving her first vaccine at work, about 45 minutes later, her legs gave out and she couldn't walk. She was sent to the hospital by ambulance. And had to be back to work within 4 days because she was fine by then. She refused the second vaccine. Her doctor wrote a note saying that it wasn't a good idea for her to take it. The workplace said that they couldn't accept her doctor's note. She had to see their doctor. She saw their doctor, and their doctor said she was fine to take it. So now she's out of a job because she refused it. So now healthcare workers have until, at least at nursing homes, have until the end of January to receive their third dose, which is the first booster shot. If they don't receive that by the end of January, they're out of a job. So there's at least 12 people at the place that I worked at who are now going to be out of a job, along with probably between 8 and 10 people who were out of a job already last year. And then as of the end of February, they're trying to mandate that you have to have the fourth booster. So we're facing a health crisis here because there's so many people that are standing up against this now. There's approximately 850,000, probably a bit more than that, where I live, in the province I live, people who work in the healthcare field. So 72,000 as of last year. So probably by the end of January, that'll be closer to, I'd say, 150,000 to 200,000 people that won't be working. So now they are allowing people who are not licensed in Canada, which is where I'm from, to start working in the healthcare system here. So their training isn't the same. A lot of them don't, English isn't their first language. So it's very difficult when you're working with seniors and you have a mask on for them to understand what you're saying. It's frustrating for them. A lot of seniors are suffering from depression. And so beyond that, for a long time, anybody who was unvaccinated could not go to a concert, to a restaurant, couldn't go to sporting events, couldn't enter a lot of buildings. Also, local hockey arenas, etc., libraries that we pay for with our taxes, we are not allowed to use. And currently, they've changed it so that no one, whether you're vaccinated or unvaccinated, can do these things. So all of our restaurants here are shut down. They can do takeout service only. A lot of restaurants have filed for bankruptcy. Back when you could enter arenas, schools, etc., as an adult, being unvaccinated, or somebody who's 12 and over being unvaccinated, or being vaccinated, 12 and under could be unvaccinated. Parents who had already paid for hockey, and hockey here is really expensive. It usually costs people, just for local league hockey, close to $1,000 or more a year. Because equipment's expensive, and including travel on top of that, because most of here are a lot of small towns, so you have to do a lot of traveling. You might be paying $1,000 a year for traveling. So these parents have signed their kids up for hockey, and parents can't even go to the arena. So some parents decided to defy that, and they got arrested. So arrested in front of a group of other adults and arrested in front of their children. So now they've shut everything down. So the things that we pay for through our taxes, nobody is allowed to access at this point. Our Prime Minister also right now has charges filed against him for inciting hate. He has publicly stated that the unvaccinated are usually racist, extremist, and misogynistic.
Well, we hear that all the
and
time.
that Canadians should not put up with this.
Okay.
And how long should we put up with this?
Okay. We're gonna
Currently, we have.
have to cut it off there for time's sake.
Okay.
But you're there at home, so feel free to write anything in the comments that you want to. Just kind of use
sounds
different
good.
words that won't get it
Okay.
flagged. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. All right. Who ever thought it would get this far? Who ever thought it would get this far? Let me get things set up here. Okay. Up until the last 2 years, it's been a slow fade and a slow downgrade. You know that song that I think Casting Crown sings, it's a slow fade that isn't noticed, or C.S. Lewis wrote that it's the gentle grade that leads down to hell. It's the ones where you lose a little bit. And we've seen the strategy of some people is they push people to the point of rioting, and then they let it sit for several months, and then they push more until they riot, and then they sit. And every time they gain ground, they never lose ground. So, can't tell by my voice. At the tender age of 50 years old, I finally hit puberty, so my life's looking pretty bright right now. It's Jesus said, "Occupy until I come," and I heard that for years and years and years, and I thought, well, that just means stay busy. Until I heard, can't think of his name, or I'd give him credit for it. But he gave it like this: in 3 days' time, we marched into Baghdad. And on the third day, I believe, we tore down Saddam Hussein's statue of himself. And oddly enough, it broke at the feet. So it left the 10 toes there. I'm sure they were in shoes, but unless Saddam had 6 toes, it's going to be 10 toes. So, and in that 10-year period, we occupied that territory. Did people die? Yeah, people died. Did we have to fight off insurgents on a regular basis? Yeah. Did we have to deal with people who said they loved us and then tried to kill us? Yeah. And I think you can see that just in life in general. I've always heard Chuck Missler say that, the God of which I'm not going to mention his name, but the God that's over in that area is a capricious God. He encourages his people to lie as long as it will further their cause. He can't be trusted. None of those people know if they're going to go to heaven. You ask them, they won't know unless they believe that they die in a war. Okay. And they lure young men in. I've heard reports of, the night before the suicide bomber or the day before they send him off, that he would wrap his privates in about 6 inches of linen, because that was one thing he didn't want to blow up, because he was going to have use of that with 72 virgins. And just like in America, there's some really great people that just have believed a lie. Once again, this ain't about what you've taken, what you haven't taken. Don't want to know. Absolutely none of my business. This is about dividing the nation and the entire world into this or into this. Now, I do understand that there has to be a division between good and evil. There has to be a division between sheep and goats. I understand all that. But still, how much ground we occupied this nation pretty solidly up until the 60s. The first thing we lost was prayer in schools. We gave it up. We said, well, we don't want to force anything on anybody, and yet it's not forcing. If they didn't want to put a hand over their heart and say a pledge, they could have walked out of the room. If they didn't want to pray, they could have just sat there quietly. And we've degraded to the point where now every religion can do something in school except Christians. Christians will get sent home for wearing a t-shirt. Christians will get home for saying a prayer. I heard a pastor lately say that her friends had been working decades at a place, and somebody came in that needed prayer, and she prayed for that person and lost her job. And it's kind of stupid. You would get in less trouble showing pornography to a minor probably than laying hands on somebody in a public place on your job and praying for them. It's just, we are in a super weird time. We lost to schools, and then we lost to abortion. Okay. And that continued on to the point where now even pastors are screaming from the pulpit, Jesus would love abortions. Jesus would support abortions. Jesus would, if he was here, he would take a certain something so he wouldn't get sick. And you got to wonder, are these people even in their right mind? The man who healed everybody would be scared of getting sick and forced into doing something. They are pushing an agenda. And you have to wonder, if everybody had put something over their face, if everybody had stayed shut down, if everybody had lined up for something, where would we be? Question mark. Where would we be? I think we've gone through enough of this now that we know that they just push and lie. And when they reach within 10 feet of that goalpost, they push and lie again and move the goalpost. Okay. It would be a never ending thing, and we would lose everything. But you know what? The Bible says that King David went to war or he stayed home, and he suffered for it. But the kings went to war in the spring, and in that day of physical war, today a spiritual war, no weapons, no nothing like that. So can't be said as inciting that. And nothing I've said since the dawn of time up until now could ever be considered medical advice. It's not. It's just my opinion, and it's information, nothing more. And you just have to wonder, how much more are people willing to give up before they finally say stop? Their main playbook was from a guy named Sun Tzu, their supposedly greatest C-word tactician, warmonger. And his famous quote is saying, all war is deception. It is. They lie to you until they got what they want. Then they lie to you again, or they just kill you. Wake up. I don't know how many different dreams I've heard by different prophetic voices saying, wake up, wake up, wake up. And running across our nation and screaming, wake up, wake up, wake up. We have to wake up. We don't have to do any sort of violence whatsoever, but we have to wake up. Dutch Sheets is somebody that God's using to help turn this thing around. And yet, I understand people saying, don't. He was told back in 88, don't worry about going to Bible college. The Lord's going to come before then. And yet he ignored that advice. Of course, you remember there was a book in 1988 about 88 reasons the rapture could happen in 1988. And if you really believe that the rapture is imminent, you don't hide at home and close your doors and just practice jumping up and down in your living room thinking, I'm ready, God, just take me. You get out there and you work in the harvest field just as fast and as hard as you can work. That's what, if you really believe that the time is that short, then there is no reason for you to hide. There is every reason for you to go out. Like I said, Dutch Sheets, one of the biggest players in this country. Satan tried to derail him by that. Mario Murillo is somebody God is using mightily in this hour, but yet his mom was given, in fact, even kind of threatened in the 60s or 50s to abort him. The doctor said, you need to abort this baby. You're not going to give him the life that he needs. And she said, no, I will not. And look how God's using him. They're making a documentary of Batavia, New York, because there's been so many miracles happen on camera there. Now, you can believe it or you not believe it. I don't care. You can go through life not believing anything and be safe. You can go through life believing everything and be safe, but you're going to have to stop and think at one point in time. But the one thing that keeps men ignorant is condemnation without investigation. But there was a young man who in Batavia, New York, they had a tent crusade. His grandma, he was that, her little grandchild. And then, she couldn't get up front and hold him, but she convinced his dad, who was mean and drunk, to take him up there. So he made it way to the front seat right off the stage. And he was up there while Mario was trying to preach, and he was screaming at him, "Hey, preacher, hey, why don't you heal my boy? He can't use his legs at all. He's not used his legs in years and years and years. Hey, preacher, you're just a sham. Hey, preacher, you don't know nothing." Okay, so guess what happens? Mario just says, "God, I can't do nothing." And he hits his knees on the stage. And he says, "God, glorify yourself." I think that is one of the most important, potent prayers, shortest prayers anybody could ever pray. Glorify yourself. And that man was holding that little crippled boy up above his head. And when Mario was down on his face praying, he started kicking his legs. He started kicking his legs so bad the man was about to drop him, and he laid him down, and he ran up on stage and hugged Mario's leg. Now you can say, "I don't believe that. That's God don't do miracles." Well, you don't believe in the God of the Bible, then. You believe in a certain doctrine that you've been sold. Okay? Because my God does miracles. I collect these things like rich men collect gold coins. I've heard Perry Stone talk about this one, and it's been confirmed. And if you could find the town in Texas and go there to the people that was there, you could probably find the people in that town. There was a man who was a big time farmer down there, and he had an accident and he broke his spine, and he couldn't move from the waist down. And so they fixed up a van for him to take a wheelchair, and they fixed up his combine to where he could run everything by hand. And for 18 years, he had every big name pastor pray for him that came through. He went to places to be prayed for. He done everything he knew to do. And he told his friends, "I don't care what anybody says. I'm coming out of this wheelchair." "Well, when's it going to happen, man?" "I don't know." "Well, how do you know?" "I just know. I'm coming out of this wheelchair." 18 years go by. 18 long years. And he's in a regular Sunday service. And he's up front, in front of the front pew in his wheelchair, and they're singing. And he hears a voice say, "Would you like for me to heal you today?" And he turns around and he thinks there's somebody behind him, and there's like nobody, 2 pews back. And he just laughs and lays his head back and says, "Yes, Lord, more than anything." And the voice said, "Get up. You ain't walked in 18 years. You got no muscle. You got no nerves. You got nothing." Okay, so he pushed himself up with his arms, and the usher saw him, and they thought he was trying to adjust himself. They started walking towards him, and he said, "Get out of here." He said, "Leave me alone." He said, "I'm coming out of this chair." And he pushed himself up with his arms. He was real strong in his arms after 18 years, only using them. And he stood there for a minute, wavered, and then his knees locked. And then the power of God hit that man, and he ran around that church. Now, if that happens in your church, are you going to tackle that man and say, "Get out of him, Satan. Get out of him. God don't heal"? Listen, nothing changes from age to age. Back in the days of the Pharisees, if it didn't fit their paradigm and God healed, he was a devil. And there was even the whole Sadducee section didn't even believe in eternity. They just thought, we got to live our best life here. So, nothing changes. Satan's tactics never change. He smokes people down through the ages. Okay. So that was a Sunday. He always did his banking on Monday. He rolls up to the bank in his I guess a different vehicle now, because he don't have a seat in his van. And he walks in up to the same teller he's used for 18 years and says, "Well, hey, Sue, how you doing today?" And Sue looks up, looks down, and screams and passes out. He goes to the next teller. She does the same thing. It's just hard to get good help in banks, right? So you know what? If you can't pray in faith over somebody, shut up. Just be quiet. Just be quiet. If your whole thing is nothing burns me worse than walking into a room and somebody meets me halfway across and they listen, it's been proven 9 ways from yesterday that people in comas hear you, everything you're saying. Nurses have family members, and they run to them and say, "Hey, Tony, we're just waiting on him to die." Really? I mean, maybe they are going to. But is that the last words that you want your family member to hear? Is, "I give up. They're just going to die." That would probably make somebody want to die. So be very careful with your words. The words have great power. Not name it, claim it, not stomping on your driveway saying, "I'm going to have a gold Cadillac." Nothing stupid like that. And, the lesson this week is the risen Lord dispels doubts. I can't think of more things that would dispel it out than to see somebody who can't do something do it. I mean, what more of a testimony to God? I mean, even when he done Lazarus, his sisters didn't believe. He said, "Well, he stinks." They didn't even believe. They said, "Well, at the end of time, you're going to raise him up." At the resurrection, he looked at him and said, "I am the resurrection." So the resurrection is not a time period. The resurrection is a person. Okay. So be careful what you say. And listen, what more have we lost? We have got to get back what we've lost, because people with evil agendas are just keep encroaching. It's never a physical thing. It is a spiritual thing. Okay. We don't need some things that we've got in this town now. There have been people for decades just slobbering at the mouth to try to make Fulton County a wet county so they could make untold amount of money off of getting probably more either old people or teenagers drunk, but I was talking to a young man one time, and it's just when Colorado legalized pot, and he said, "Man, we're going to have the best roads, the best schools, the best everything." And if you check out there, you probably don't see that really held true. You probably see a lot of people that were rich get richer. And I said, you married? And he said, "No." I said, "When you have little kids, 8, 9, 10, even 13, 14, 15, do you want them smoking dope?" He said, "Well, no." I said, you're willing to make millions off other people's kids?" Come on now. It's like the old joke I used to say that, let's get a petition around to open up a brothel in Salem, Arkansas. We're going to, we're just going to reopen the altar of Baal. You're going to come in, pay some money, have sex, and leave. But we're going to stop that with your wives, daughters, and granddaughters. Takes on a whole different dimension when it's your family. Okay. So you need to be, everything you do, you better consider it done to you, because it may very well be. We're going to look into the disciples walking with Jesus on the road to Emmaus. The same day, 2 of Jesus' followers were walking to the village of Emmaus, 7 miles from Jerusalem. 7 is a very significant number. As they walked along, they were talking about everything that had happened. As they talked and discussed these things, Jesus suddenly came and began walking with them. And I would say back then, because there were so many robbers, as long as you weren't someone who's going to hurt them, they welcomed the company. But God kept him from recognizing him. And they say, "Well, how's that possible? How did Jesus walk through the crowd when they took him up to the top of the hill to cast him off?" Don't limit what your God can do. Okay. He asked them, what are you discussing so intently as you walk along? They stopped short. Sadness written across their faces. Then one of them, Cleopas, replied, "You must be the only person in Jerusalem who hasn't heard about all the things that have happened there the last few days." What things? Jesus asked. The things that happened to Jesus, the man from Nazareth, they said. He was a prophet who did powerful miracles, and he was a mighty teacher in the eyes of God and all the people. But our leading priests and other religious leaders handed him over to be condemned to death, and they crucified him. We had hoped that he was the Messiah who had come to rescue Israel. This all happened 3 days ago. when Jesus said to them, "You foolish people, you find it so hard to believe all the prophets wrote in the scriptures." You know why they was hard for them to believe? Because most of the rabbis didn't believe that God could raise somebody from the dead. They taught two messiahs: the suffering Messiah, uh, Yeshua ben Joseph, and the conquering Messiah, Yeshua ben David, the conqueror. They said there's only two. He's going to represent the same thing, but there's two of them. He said we had hoped he was the Messiah who had come to rescue Israel. This all happened there days ago. You know, whatever you do, if you've got a desire and you want to see it in your lifetime as far as something you're accomplishing for the church or your family or for Israel, realize that you may not see that come to pass, but God's still want to use you in that capacity. There's ample evidence that Columbus was Jewish. When he wrote to the king and queen, he signed it in regular script. When he wrote to his son, he signed it with Jewish idioms and language, Hebrew language. And his whole thing of going to America was this. He wanted to find gold to start a war to reobtain Jerusalem. That was his goal. He wanted to kick the Moors out and take Jerusalem back for the Jews. Did he accomplish it? No, and yes. Did he accomplish it in his lifetime? No. But what he started built a nation, a mighty Christian nation who has been a covering for the Jewish people. And when we have righteous leaders in our head, they honor Israel. And when we have unrighteous leaders, they deny Israel. And every time our nation denies Israel, we go through a little bit of hell on earth. You know, so many people want to write the church or write Israel out of the Bible. You can't. There is no replacement theology. There is no, the church is Israel. No, you can't do that. The church is a divine 2,000-year interruption. And then when we're gone, God will turn his attention back to them. Okay? So in a figure, he did. He helped found a nation who have helped, through England and America, get Jerusalem back for the Jews, including the great orange pumpkin that nobody likes, who was inaugurated on his, I believe his, how old was he? It was 3 7s. It was like 70 years, 7 months, and 7 days when he was inaugurated. You think, well, that don't mean nothing. Believe what you want to believe. But he was the only president to ever put the consulate back in Jerusalem. The hill where Christ was crucified is 777 meters high from sea level. You think these are just accidental things. Okay, it's not. Okay, we had hoped that he was the Messiah who was to rescue Israel. This all happened 3 days ago. And he will. They were part of that, but in their lifetime, they didn't see Israel rescued from the Romans. Okay, they saw the Romans with their Syrian conscripts destroy the temple and their entire way of life. Okay, but there, through what they've done and passed down generations, has seen so many things come to pass because in their time, God used them. So don't think just because you don't see it before you close your eyes in death that you weren't a big part of this, because you were. By this time, they were nearing Emmaus, which, they were on the road to Emmaus. Emmaus means earnest desire. Anytime you're on the road to earnest desire and talking about the things of the Lord as they were doing amongst themselves, Jesus is going to show up. Well, where's scripture for that? Well, we're two or more together in my name, I'm there with them. Right? But they begged him to stay with us since it's getting late. So he went home with them. As they sat down to eat, he took bread and blessed it. Then he broke it and gave it to them. Suddenly their eyes were open and they recognized him. At that moment, he disappeared. They said to each other, "Didn't our hearts burn within us as he talked with us on the road and explained the scriptures to us?" There is so much depth I mean, are you not consumed with everything that your word? I mean, you think it's just many Christians think it's just a collection of stories that can't even be trusted, and yet you have no idea how powerful a word you hold in your hand. It is absolutely mind blowing. I mean, if you want to find out, if you're of the ilk, or people say, well, you can make the Bible say anything you want. Okay, in a way, you can. You can cherry pick verses. You can twist this. You can take this out, and you can make it say what you want. But when you take it all in context of each other, you can't do that. I counsel people, go pull up Chuck Missler. He's got a video out there. Chuck Missler. He's got a video. He's got hundreds of videos out there, but the one Beyond Coincidence 2 is a really great one to get you started. God has done everything in order, and just like, the Jews came back to Jerusalem on the exact same year that they were foretold to. You can go back in the Old Testament and find the Gematria, and it come out to the year 1948. Okay. And then again in 67. And guess what happened? After both of those things, massive healing revivals in America, because the medical field was not that advanced. People didn't die from heart attacks back then. They died from infections. There was no antibiotics. Okay. In fact, I talked to my doctor once, and she said that there was very few people even heard of cancer. For a very few people, they called it a wasting disease, but that was after our food chain has been hijacked and polluted. And you can't just believe rock star epidemiologists, because what an epidemiologist does, he just compares data. Okay. So they done a study up in New York somewhere, and in New York, in a certain section of it that they studied, the same number of people that ate butter were the same number of divorced couples. So through epidemiology, you can deduce that everybody that eats butter is going to get a divorce, right? So you can manipulate data and make it say, and then you can terrify people into following it. Once again, this is about, do not give up any more of your freedoms. This is wake up, stand up quietly, but stand up boldly and stand up firmly, and just say no. That's all you gotta do. Say no. If you want to know what's coming next, look up the Dana Coverstone dream called Holding Your Breath, and you'll see what's about to happen in a few months. But for the church, we're going to be okay. But society-wise, this is probably going to be a wild ride this year, and that shouldn't make you upset at all, especially if you're watching this. That should let you know that God knew all this beforehand, and through certain people that were trustworthy, he said, this is what's going to happen. So you go into something with a heads up, then it's not going to be it's terrifying if you know what's going on. But I think I'm going to Now I know why some people didn't sing in the choir last week, and they had this crud right here. It puts a strain on your voice. All right. Well, Pastor's about to crank it up out there. So tune in to Salem First Assembly. Facebook will be SFA. I'll go ahead and share it too, but come and join us there. Thank you for watching. One last thing. Last week I gave an appeal to people using the prodigal son, and that was right and wrong. The prodigal son was a son, so he was a backslidden believer. In fact, his dad said he was dead, but now he's alive, so we got to celebrate. Okay, so if you're lost and dead and trespassing in sin, come home. Come home. There's nothing out there that is better, more fun, and especially the long run. Sin will absolutely decimate your life. It will seem so fun for a while, and then it will take over life. Okay, don't live short-sighted. Live with the end of you. Okay, but if you don't know who Jesus is, contact me. If you want to discuss anything like that. If you want to discuss anything that happened today or we talked about today, then, please feel free to contact the pastor. If you didn't like anything I said, then can't help that. Thanks for watching.